Greetings and welcome to Photoshop Techniques, Real-Life Examples with Larry Vogel. In this series of videos, I will be sharing with you Photoshop techniques as solutions to real-life images with specific problems. Some of the images in this series will be from files submitted to me by photographers for my critique sessions. I have been holding monthly critique sessions for over 30 years now. During these sessions, I have helped hundreds of photographers improve the quality of their photographs through group critiques and offering image processing solutions through Photoshop. During this time, I have gathered together thousands of real-life images from past critique participants. So I'm going to draw from this collection of photos and help lead you through a series of before and after real-life examples, showing you specific image problems with specific Photoshop solutions. I say this is guaranteed to satisfy both sides, the technical and the creative photographer. Alright, so here we are in Photoshop. This is a stock photo image, pretty typical. We got a mountain with a big blue sky, and we're going to talk about halos today. And I'm going to kind of discuss three different kinds of halos. And first we'll talk about a little bit about the hard-edged halo. I've created a file here that where I've simulated the type of halo problems you might see. So here's the hard edge. Very hard to see unless we're at 100%. So let me zoom in here. And many of you, I'm sure, have seen this problem where after we've done some adjustments to the sky or darkened it, you'll end up with this really small white or brighter edge around the edge of like where a mountain meets the sky. This is probably one of the most typical places where you'll see this problem. So that would be what I'm going to call a hard-edged halo, and that's we'll show a technique to fix that. A second one might be what we would call this soft-edged halo, and there's a little bit more of a glow. And this sometimes can come from masking problems, or if you're trying to darken something and maybe you're using the tool to burn in an edge or something like that, you might end up with this kind of soft halo. And sometimes, like say in evening skies, it can be natural, like maybe there'll be a light source or a city on the other side of the mountain that creates a glow along the horizon. And even though it might be natural, it's still worth getting rid of, I think, or fixing, because it can come off just looking like it's a masking problem. And then, of course, the third kind are the good halos, right? So this is the kind of halo you want to keep if you've got one. All right, so no technique to get rid of that. All right, so here we are. I'm going to go ahead and start on this hard-edged halo. I'm going to go ahead and just duplicate this hard-edge halo layer, so Control or Command J. And I will say a little bit about shortcuts versus just doing them through the menu up here at the top. And so real easy to come up to the top and say duplicate layer, or you'll hear me say Command or Control J. So Control would be the Windows, Command would be the Mac. So anyhow, when you hear me say those, you can always go and kind of transfer in your mind that, hey, I'm working with a Mac, so I'll use Command, or if I'm working with Windows, I'll use Control. Also, just another thing to note, I mean, if you are trying to learn shortcuts, you'll see when you get up here into the panel, the menus up here, like here, undo layer, because I just made this copy, Control or Command Z. So I'm on a Windows machine, so I'm using Control Z. If you're on Mac, it would be Command Z. But you can learn your shortcuts here. So if you look up here and you see, so copy, Control C, and paste is going to be Control V, and so on. Almost every single place where you would use or have a shortcut available, you can find them listed inside the menu up here. So it's a great way to kind of learn some of the shortcuts as you go. Now, there's so many of them, it's going to be hard to probably, you know, remember every shortcut, but it's really worthwhile. The things that you do repeatedly, try to grab onto some of these shortcuts, and they'll really kind of help your process speed up quite a bit. All right, so I've made a copy, and you'll see here in the name of the layer, Hard Edge Halo Copy. And the reason why I'm going to do that is generally whenever I do any retouching, I will make a copy layer. That way I can always get back to my original layer. So we're always trying to work in a non-destructive workflow, some way that we can get back in case we make a mistake, or maybe we made some kind of obvious, maybe we made the problem worse, right? So so anyhow, we're going to work on this hard edge halo copy layer. And to fix this problem, I think I'll zoom in just a little bit more to make it, I mean, kind of see it's starting to pixelate because it's we're at 200%, and it's not a big giant file. So anyhow, there's our edge, and you're going to notice that it goes all the way around the mountain here. It's going to be more noticeable in areas where it butts up against the darker part of the sky than, say, where we have lighter edges. But those still need to be, I'm going to say, fixed, right? So I'm going to start over here at the left-hand side of the image, and I'm going to use the clone stamp tool. So you'll find the clone stamp tool here. And if I come in and let's just say whenever we pick a tool, we're going to be looking across the top here. And we have tool settings here that we can choose from. And because I'm not working on an empty pixel layer, I'll just make sure this just says current layer. And we can choose a brush setting here. So if we want to pick the size of the brush or if we want to pick the hardness of the brush. And so I'm going to use a fairly soft edge brush. So here would be 0, would be a real soft. This would be a very hard edge brush. And the problem with the hard edge brush is you're going to see the edge of where you've done your cloning or your brushing. So I'm going to keep it fairly soft, somewhere around that 28-30%. And remember, you can always undo if it looks too obvious, but I'm going to go ahead and start from there. The real trick to this process is going to be over here in this mode setting. And typically, the tool mode or blend mode would be defaulted to normal. Now, blend modes are like really, really cool things to learn about because in this case, you're going to see how great these little blend modes can work. And as well as blend modes on tool functions, over here inside the panel, we have blend modes that we can create for layers also. And maybe on a later lesson, we'll talk about blend modes on layers. But today we're going to talk about this blend mode function as it relates to the clone stamp tool. So the way the clone stamp tool works is we need to make a selection, what we want to copy. So I want to copy this blue very close to the edge of where I'm going to paste. So I'm going to copy and stamp over this area here. So hold down Alt or Option, and you get the little target, and click the mouse, and you'll see inside the preview, I'll make that a little larger, you'll see inside the preview that when I make a selection, that's the information that I'm going to be stamping wherever I put this tool. Now I'm using my left or right bracket keys to make the image or make the brush larger or smaller. You can also, again, up in the tool option, use the size, but it's a little bit of a pain. I got to come over here and draw it over too big, come back over here, pull it down a little bit. Could make it a little bit smaller. So anyhow, you see that's kind of a pain. So if I close that out and I use my bracket key, left bracket key makes the tool smaller, right bracket key makes the tool larger. So I'm looking to keep it somewhere in that range, maybe there. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to make this selection right here, and you'll see when I start cloning, it eats away at the mountain, but also heals the sky a little bit. Now I can kind of see there's a little bit of a hard edge there, so I might want to actually go back to a little bit softer brush, and I'm going to probably bring it a little closer to 0. Now, this is the way the clone stamp is supposed to work when it's in the normal blend mode. I'm going to undo that, Control or Command Z. I'm going to make this selection, and you'll see now when I clone over this, there's the magic. Watch. Oops, let me undo that. I forgot to change my blend mode. So what we're looking to do is, all these blend modes do different things. So the blend mode that we're going to want to use in this case is darken. And what the darken blend mode does, all these blend modes are like mathematical formulas that say, hey, I'm putting this pixel over the top of that pixel, and how do I want the image to react to this typical or to this particular blend mode? So I make that selection. And now when I clone over this edge, you'll see what it does. It only clones over the brightest pixels. Wait a minute, what? So what it's saying is, in the darken mode, copy these blue pixels and only apply them on the image where the pixels are at 50% or brighter, right? If I change to the opposite and say, let's go to lighten, and I select this value, and I clone over here, it doesn't clone over the white because those pixels are light already, but it clones over all the darker pixels. Pretty amazing, I gotta tell you. So I'm gonna undo that twice. I can see I'm a little bit high on my settings. So typically what I do, darken mode, and then I'm going to drop the opacity to about 80%. And I think I'm gonna go ahead and go to a 0 setting on my hardness. And what that's gonna do is it's going to allow me to make this selection, and as I clone, rather than cloning from here up, right, from the horizon line up, because this is where you're going to see where I'm doing the cloning, I'm actually going to drop the tool down inside of the mountain area. I can actually make even that a little bit smaller. And now I'm going to just clone right on this edge here. And you'll see now you really can't see that difference. So you want to keep making sure that you make a selection near where you're starting, and you'll see the little plus sign up there is going to follow me, and that's telling me what information I'm actually selecting from. And I can keep, I'll just let go of the mouse, and if for some reason that 80% doesn't allow it, I can go back over the second time to cover that white area. I can always do it. But when I'm doing this with a very soft brush, you got to remember that the edge of that brush is very feathered, right? So as I get up into this area where you're seeing these lighter pixels, as long as I'm adjacent to the same area, it should do a pretty good job filling that in. And here you can kind of see it copied that little bit lighter space here. It's okay, it just looks like another cloud. As I get into the lighter pixel areas, I might want to make a new selection to make sure I'm in line there. And then as I come across here, I'll come back up here and just keep going. And as long as my tool selection stays out near that edge, we do a pretty good job. And if it messes up somewhere, it's really easy. You can just, again, like I said before, Control or Command Z, which is always a good reason too. So think about this. When I make a selection and I start cloning and make another selection, if I keep making new selections, then if I make a mistake, or say it gets up where it gets too dark and I have to undo it, I'm only going to undo, so again, Control or Command Z, I'm only going to undo that little short distance, not this whole thing. So sometimes it's better not to try to do it all in one, continuous brush stroke. If you do it in little sections like that, if you have to undo something, then you don't have to do the whole thing over again. So let me go ahead and turn this copy off, and you'll see where we've actually repaired that halo. So wow, not bad, pretty cool, huh? So that is all about the clone stamp, using a blend mode of darken and dropping the opacity just a little bit, somewhere between about 80% is usually where I start to see how well it works. And then there's the fix. So that's our hard edge halo fix. All right, so now let's go ahead and take a look at this soft edge halo. This is a little bit harder to see as we're zoomed in. So I'll zoom back out just a little bit, and you'll see same problem or same idea. Wherever the clouds are darker, the halo is going to be a little more obvious, and wherever we're sort of into that lighter area, the halo is not going to show up as much, but it does. You'll still see it, and the further we back out, the more obvious the halo becomes. All right, so I'm going to zoom in just so we can see, or actually let me go ahead and get a full screen just to start with. So the trick here is what we're going to use is we're going to use a curve adjustment. And again, this time I'm not going to actually be retouching. I'm going to actually use an adjustment layer. So if we use adjustment layers are non-destructive. So I can come up here to layer and then down to new adjustment layer, and I can select curves. And you'll see that's going to give me a chance to rename this. So I can call it Halo Retouch. Say OK, and then you'll see over here now I have a curve adjustment layer called Halo Retouch, and I have a curve adjustment. And if I turn this off and on, so far I've done nothing to the image, so not anything yet. So what I'm looking to do is create a curve adjustment that's going to darken just this area around the edge of the mountain. Can it be done? Wait a minute, sure you can. It's Photoshop, remember? All right, so when I'm trying to darken or lower some contrast or make it less visible, I'll grab the curve up here at the top. Now remember, this is the highlight side of the curve. You can see down here on this bar, shadows are on the left and highlights are on the right, midtones in the middle. Okay, so I'm going to pull the highlight part of the curve down just a bit. Oh, maybe down about to that, close to the first quarter marking here. And then I'll also pull down the midtone just a bit. So this is going to darken. Now here's the thing. When we look at an adjustment layer, when we create an adjustment layer, it automatically comes with a white mask. And for those of you that aren't real familiar with masking, the concept here is that white reveals, so in this case the white mask is going to reveal our curve adjustment layer, which is going to darken the image. And because the mask is white all over, we're going to end up with the adjustment affecting the entire image. Now we only want to affect just this little glow around the edge of the image. So if white reveals, and if black, so we have a white mask, if we are on the properties panel here, by clicking on the mask, it gives us an option to invert. So if I invert the mask is now black. Now I can also use the controller Command I shortcut also. We'll flip it back and forth. So white reveals and black conceals. So in this case, the entire black mask is concealing the effects of that darkening curve. And now if I turn the layer visibility off and on, you'll see there's no change because we've concealed the entire effect. Okay, so here comes kind of the trick. So how do we, in this case, if we want to reveal something, I can grab a brush. So here's the brush tool. And the brush tool will paint with whatever color is in the foreground down here on your toolbar. Now the mask is black, so I don't want to paint with black. I'm going to hit the little reverse symbol here, put white in the foreground. Now the shortcut there is simply the X key. So if I hit the X key, you'll see those black and white foreground and background colors switch. So I have a black mask. I'm going to be wanting to paint with white. And again, I have the paintbrush selected, and here's my tool options up at the top, just like we saw with the clone stamp tool. Now, we've got this, again, hardness. We can paint with a hard edge brush, or we can paint with a soft edge brush, or anything in between there, right? So I'm going to select, I think I'm going to select a fairly soft edge brush. Let's just try it. We'll see how it works, right? This is the thing about working with a non-destructive workflow. Anything that we do, in this case painting on the mask, can always be reversed or undone, right? So I'm going to start with the soft edge brush. I've got white selected as my foreground, and you'll see if I get my brush large enough, again with the left and right bracket keys, if I try to paint along this edge to darken that halo, now let me zoom in there just a bit. You'll see I'm really kind of messing up. I'm darkening the mountain, and I'm going beyond the edge of that halo. All right, so here's our trick. I'm going to undo that. The trick here is we need to make a selection to protect the mountain and only paint into the sky area. Now, you saw that looked a little bit dark, but don't worry about it, because once we get started, we'll be able to readjust the curve, or we will also be able to, on the tool options, change the opacity or the flow of the brush. So I need to make a selection. Well, so it's always great to start with the quick selection tool over here. And with the quick selection, what I can do is I want to make a selection of the sky. So I'm just going to click and drag across here and let go and let it kind of, calculate this selection as you go. Don't just try to do it all in one move. And at a certain point, it's going to figure out what I'm doing. And what it's looking at is the edge of the mountain against the pixels contrast of the edge of the mountain to the contrast of the pixels of the sky. And it sees this edge here. So it makes this selection, right? So the cool thing, or the thing to try to remember to do, because rather than having to make these selections over and over again, is if you make a selection, and especially if you make a complicated one. Now this one wasn't that complicated, but it's a good habit to get into, is to go up under select, go down to save selection, and give it a name. So we'll call this one sky. And we say okay. Now if I go up here to deselect my selection, there's deselect. There's our shortcut, Control plus D. So Control D or Command D for those of you that are going to be working with Mac, or if you want to come up here, you can do it. So there, my selection is gone, but there's a couple of ways to get it back. One way is go back up under select. We're going to say load selection. And in this list here right now, you're going to see it says channel. Right now it says Halo Retouch Mask. That's because that's what we have selected up here. But if you hit the drop down menu, you're going to see I have two sky ones because I actually loaded one in earlier. So I'll say sky, I'll say OK, and there it is, magically back again. All right, so let's understand what a selection does. I now grab the brush tool, and I'll make the brush just larger so we can see this. And I'm going to be painting with white. If I paint across this area here, you'll notice that it doesn't affect the mountain. If I turn this off and on, you'll see just the sky is being opened up. If I Alt or Option click on the mask, I can see what that looks like. So there's our protection, and there's the area that's going to be revealed as we paint. Okay, so we want to do this. I'm going to undo that paint. We want to do this in a really subtle, controlled way. And so I'm going to keep my selection active. So Alt or Option click on the mask thumbnail. That'll get us back here. Now here's the cool thing. I'm going to zoom in just a bit, just so I can see where I'm painting. I'm going to get a little smaller brush. Like I said, I'm starting with my hardness brush set to 0. And what I want to do, it's protected down here. So no matter what, I can paint down here all day long. It's not going to do anything. And again, I'm going to drop this opacity down to about 30%. And the idea here is to just bring the edge of this brush up so that it's just above that line. And you'll see if I look at the mask now, Alt or Option, there's just a little halo there that's appearing. Now here's the cool thing about a paintbrush or the brush tool. I'm painting at 30%. If I click and paint one stroke, and then I click and paint again, wherever it overlaps, it's going to keep adding, or in this case, more white. So each time I paint over this, I'm going to get a little bit more revealing until I get to 100%. Okay, so that's really the magic of this brush tool, and the reason why we would drop it down to a low opacity, because we want to slowly paint in here until it looks about right. Okay, so but we want to be doing this while we're looking at the image. Now, one thing that can be really distracting when you see this, they call them marching ants or our selection edge there. But the thing we can do is we can temporarily hide it. So Control or Command H, and now it's not, you can't see it. But again, let me go back to the mask just to show you. If I paint here, it's still selected, right? It's just hidden. And the cool thing about that is that it will allow us to see that edge a little bit better without those marching ants interfering with our view. The thing you got to remember though is it's really easy to get kind of going and forget, and then you move on to do your next thing, and that hidden selection can still be active, and you're trying to do something down below the selection and it's not happening. So you have to remember Control or Command H will make it back visible again, and then Control or Command D will deselect it. So I'm going to rehide that, and now again with the brush down in the bottom end here, I'm going to, at that 30%, I'm just going to slowly brush over this edge here. Now if you're using a mouse, it's not impossible to do. I use a trackball mouse, and what I could do too is I also have a pen tool and pad where I can, I'm going to make it a little bit smaller, and you use my pen tablet. I have a little more flexibility as I do this brushing, and you'll see across this edge here, and I'm just lifting and stroking, just like I showed you earlier, that stroke, each time I stroke over that value, it begins to slowly reveal that curve, and more times I stroke it, the closer to the white value the mask becomes, and then that reveals my my change here. So again, if there's any place that looks like I've gone too far, let me just, as an example, if I paint here and now I've got too much showing, if I switch my brush back to black, so you see in the foreground here, black is now my foreground color, and now if I paint up in here, it will slowly paint out the curve adjustment. So that's the magic of masking, is we can paint in, we can paint out. And I can go over these areas more than one time with the brush. And when it, oops, I'm still painting with black. Let me switch back to white because I want to reveal. I was trying to figure out why that wasn't changing. And so, you know, even somebody like me who's got their 10,000 hours in on the computer, we all make these kinds of mistakes, right? So again, if I've gone too far, I'll use my X key to switch back to black and back to white, and I can go back and forth all day long. So rather than doing the whole mountain, again, I'll just show you sort of like over here. I think I could use a little bit more here. And if it turns out that your curve adjustment's not strong enough, this is the beauty of this. Once you get the mask in place, I can always double click and reopen the curve adjustment, and I can darken this. You'll see if I go too far, right? So I can readjust my curve until I get something that looks just perfect. And then let me turn this off and on, before and after. I mean, you would think that would be a tough thing to paint out, but remember, we still have our selection hidden back there. Controller Command H reveals the selection. The selection only makes the sky able to be painted into on the mask. And when you start painting again, you want to make sure that you reselect that mask. Alter option to see what the mask looks like. There's our mask, right? So there's that really soft edge. In some places it's nearly white. Some places it's just barely altered from white to a middle gray value. So we're black conceals, white reveals, and gray will partially reveal that effect of the curve, which in this case happens to be a darkening curve. So we've darkened the image, and there's our selection. Turn this back on, and there's the effect. Pretty cool. So again, this is totally non-destructive. I can kind of see down here I have a little bit heavy right in there. I'll make sure I have black as my foreground color, and I will just do a quick little stroke over that area. And now let me turn off my selection. Controller Command D for my deselect. I'll zoom back out, and you'll see as I turn off this halo retouch, there's the soft edge as it reappears and disappears. And I stopped up in here, so I would need to go all the way around the edge of the mountain. But you get the idea. You don't have to see me do that. So there you go. Using a curve adjustment with a selective mask to darken that glow. That's for our soft edge halo. And for our hard edge halo, using the clone stamp tool, and with the clone stamp tool, using the blend mode of darken and a little bit lower opacity. Same thing as you can build up density by cloning over it more than one time if you need to. And if you have any problem, make sure that you're, or so you don't have a problem, make sure that you are always working on a duplicate layer if you're doing any retouching. That way you can always get back and fix any problem that may have been created by your retouching. So don't get nervous about it, because you can always undo it. No problem. So remember, we want to get rid of our soft edge halos, we want to get rid of our hard edge halos, but we always want to keep our good halos. All right, so this has been Larry Vogel showing you a little bit about how to remove halos from our landscape image. Okay, so there you are, another episode of Photoshop Techniques, Real Life Examples with me. I'm Larry Vogel. Thanks for tuning in, and always be sure to like, share, and subscribe. Be sure to check the description below, where you will find links to my critique events, the Digital Photo Exchange, a meetup group with 2 online meetings per month on the second and last Thursdays, and also check out my Photoshop on the Fly Monday morning sessions, where we discuss all things photographic, every Monday morning at 10 a.m. my time here in Southern California. Be sure to look for the links below in the description, and until next time, stay creative, be inspired, and be an inspiration to others.